Okay, so welcome everybody with us today. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us for the webinar, Bonds of Kinship, Cultivating Positive Family Relationships Through Skill Building Within an Islamic Framework. My name is Hasna Mukhtar and I'm the Special Program Director at Peaceful Families Project. I would like to begin, inshallah, by just a brief introduction about Peaceful Families Project. So let me share my screen. So the Peaceful Families Project is an initiative devoted to ending domestic violence in Muslim families by facilitating awareness workshops for Muslim leaders and communities, providing cultural sensitivity trainings and technical assistance for professionals, conducting research, and developing resources. Our mission is that we recognize domestic violence as a form of oppression that affects people of both faiths. Our mission is to work towards ending all types of abuse in Muslim families. Our vision is that through education and training, we seek to promote attitudes and beliefs that emphasize justice, freedom from oppression, and family harmony. We believe that a better understanding of religious and cultural values can be used as a resource to prevent domestic violence, and that religion and culture should never be used to justify abusive behavior. Our goals is to provide material for Muslims that are grounded in the Quran and the Sunnah, to create change from within, work together with clergy and communities of faith, adopt domestic violence trainings, tools for Muslim communities, and develop new resources. We encourage a holistic approach to addressing domestic violence among Muslim families and communities through collaboration with imams, community leaders, community members, social service professionals, activists, educators, legal providers, and youth leaders. Please follow us on our social media platforms, and thank you for attending. So right now, I am going to just share a brief introduction of our webinar host today. Neelam Kaki is a graduate in LLB Laws from the London School of Economics and completed the legal practice course at the College of Law, London. Prior to moving to the United States, she was employed at a London City law firm. She pursued her interest in social justice in a voluntary capacity while working for the Samaritans, a UK-based organization supporting suicidal clients. She subsequently worked with LifeWire as a helpline volunteer supporting survivors in domestic violence situations, and later as a court-appointed special advocate supporting minors subject to dependency proceedings. Neelam currently works as a coordinator of the Peaceful Families Task Force within API Chaya, an organization serving South Asian, Middle Eastern, and API survivors of gender-based violence. Her work within the PFT involves working with local Muslim communities to create peaceful families by using the Quranic model of family through training, education, and community engagement. Neelam has been working with API Chaya since 2013, and much of her work is currently based around domestic violence prevention. Welcome, Neelam, and I'm just gonna hand it over to you so you can start with the presentation.
Thank you very much, Sister Hasna. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري وأحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'd like to begin by thanking the Peaceful Families Project for providing me the opportunity to present today. It's a real honor to be able to come in front of you all and speak about our domestic violence prevention work, specifically with regards to the Bonds of Kinship curriculum. So I will begin by sharing the screen. Okay, excuse me. There we go. Okay, can people see this? Okay, is the PowerPoint slide showing? Yep, okay, great. So yes, thank you, Hasna, for the introduction. So yes, I work with API Chaya, a Seattle-based nonprofit serving survivors of gender-based violence, which was established in the late 90s. And I should say the project that I work with, the Peaceful Families Task Force, began around the same time, and it was formed actually under the guidance of Sharifa Al-Khatib, who is part of the Peaceful Families Project. So, you know, it's great to be here, you know, in partnership again. So with regards to the Bonds of Kinship curriculum, today's presentation will be an introduction to the program, which was developed to promote positive family relationships based on faith teachings, scientific data, and which incorporated skill building to be able to provide Muslim communities and actually communities of other faiths too, with a tool with which to be able to cultivate more harmonious relationships within their lives. So today I plan to cover the background to the curriculum, how it was compiled, its structure and content, and how we have been applying it in practice since its development back in 2017. So an overview of the curriculum is that we know that there are, you know, a lot of resources out there which provide information on parenting and family relationships. And so the Bonds of Kinship curriculum is something that we wanted to make quite unique and something that would meet the needs of the communities that we were serving, so i.e. Muslim communities and other faith-based communities too. So our first priority was to work within an Islamic framework, and this was vital in view of our audience. And so we have used faith teachings both as a basis for the curriculum, and we have interwoven it as well into each session of the program. And as we go more into detail about the content, I will aim to demonstrate just how we've done that and provide some examples. Secondly, the curriculum is very much grounded in a values-based system. So that our goal is to provide the skills and framework to improve family relationships. And this is a subject that can be quite sensitive, particularly if we are thinking about situations where there may be harm within the home environment. And so, you know, we honor and recognize that people may come to this program you know, with from certain backgrounds and certain issues that they may be experiencing. So from the get-go, we emphasize that, you know, there's no judgment being passed, and that we recognize that family dynamics and structures can show up in a myriad of forms. And so from the outset, we try to identify values which you know, are fairly universal and that people have a desire to try and implement and uphold. And what we've found is that that provides a much safer environment where people are more willing to participate and open up. Skill building is another major component of the Bonds of Kinship program. And the philosophy around that is that if we are trying to create positive family relationships, we need to be there to be able to provide alternatives to perhaps patterns of behavior that are not necessarily conducive to harmony within the family. So the idea is that we aim to support the people that attend our programs with having them assess their current practices, and where there are gaps to be able to fill those with specific skills that they can practice. The program is also data backed. We want the program to be credible and to demonstrate that Islamic teachings are definitely in line with modern research. And as such, we have included information from a range of reliable scientific sources, and we cover that within the curriculum, which I will be showing a little later on. Another component is that the program is intergenerational. So what that means is that we're not taking certain members of the family in a vacuum. We are definitely thinking about the values and skills that family members would like to pass on to their future generations. And so much of the content of the curriculum and the activities are geared around interaction between parents and their children, for example, or grandparents and grandchildren. And then we also have certain aspects that are geared specifically towards teens and youth, for example. So the idea is that everybody's receiving the same type of message and the same skills, but in a way that is meaningful for them and in a way that they can apply it with their relationships amongst their family members. Our goal is also to make the program sustainable. While we have developed the program through Peaceful Families Task Force at API Chaya and rolled it out into communities, our longer term goal is definitely to equip communities to be able to hand over the program to them and have them really tailor it to the needs of the centres that they're working at or the groups with which they're interacting. And so for that, we try to really have communities buy into the program. We hope that it's something that they find valuable and would like to sort of onboard for themselves. And we do also continue to provide support in terms of training, material, publicity, and so on. But as I mentioned, the goal is that it's something that communities will want to take ownership of. And in that way, it does make it sustainable and successful. So a little bit about the background to the Bonds of Kinship curriculum. So back in 2016, the DSHS in Washington State was inviting applications for grants around domestic violence prevention programs. And this fitted very naturally into the work that API Chaya was already doing. We have a number of programs where prevention is a core component. So, for example, we have a youth program, obviously the faith-based programs, and then we also have some outreach and training where, prevention does form a significant factor. And so we applied for the grant, and and our application was accepted, and we received that in around September-October time in 2016. And there were specific requirements under that grant. So, for example, given the gap in services being provided to marginalised communities, including some communities of faith, that was a core component. The idea of it being intergenerational was also quite significant. And it was something that had to be a fairly structured program, fairly broad, and also in depth. So we took that on. We had some, ideas about how we could implement that, both within our existing programs, but also to expand it out more broadly into the communities that we were working with. And another component in terms of the background to this work is that we carried out a community needs assessment in order to be able to really determine what the focus of the program should be and what angle we would need to come in at, because obviously we wanted to build a curriculum that was a response to the community needs at the time. So when it came to compiling the curriculum, as I mentioned, community needs was the first thing. And I'll be talking in a moment about what the main needs that came through from our survey were. We also had to take into account state guidelines, and we wanted to make sure that we used a range of resources to compile the curriculum in order to make it as rich and varied as possible, and to really utilize a lot of the information that was out there. So the community needs that came up, we carried out a survey. I would say a conservative guess would be that we got around 150 to 200 responses, and we had sent this questionnaire to around the 40 mosques in the Greater Puget Sound area where we're based. We also reached out to participants in the programs that we as an agency run. So for example, at our youth meetings, we asked them to complete the survey. So we tried to get a range of responses whilst making sure that it was, communities that this program would be relevant to. So from those surveys, these were the responses that we received. That there's definitely a need for more resources relating to positive relationships within faith and ethnic communities. Secondly, there was an acknowledgement that there were difficulties in communicating across generations, which were leading to challenges in building support systems. And the third one was that there was a need for developing skills around parenting practices. So this information was really invaluable for when we were developing the curriculum, because it told us not only that there was a gap in the existing services where, research shows us, and our work experience has shown us that mainstream providers don't necessarily meet the needs of people from certain faith and ethnic communities. But secondly, it was very specific that there were difficulties in communication that were being faced by both parents and their youth and teens. So this again provided us with very important information as to what the content of our curriculum needed to be. So we're looking at, how can we impart information around improving communication skills. Because obviously, if that's leading to challenges in building support systems, that is a concern, because research shows that by far one of the top factors in the emotional and mental well-being of not only youth, but individuals in general, is having a reliable support system. And obviously, the family unit is a core structure within our lives, and so that would, or it should at least in theory, be the first level of support. And so that was a really helpful insight for us, because we realized that we really needed to emphasize and empower families to be able to build those support systems up. And again, similarly, there was a need for developing skills around parenting practices. So research shows us that typically our parenting practices come from, what we witnessed and what we experienced growing up through our parents' practices. And we know from our work that some of those may not necessarily be conducive to the promotion of healthy families. And so again, that was why skill building was another focus for us. And so, and what was also interesting is that not only did the youth in particular express these gaps, but they did also express a desire to, for the support that they needed and for those skills and information in order for them to be able to improve those relationships. So this was one of our main starting points in compiling the curriculum. The second one was the state guidelines around domestic violence prevention, and Washington State bases their guidelines on that of the Center for Disease Control. There are four main elements to that. addressing the root causes of violence, shifting culture, building skills, and generally promoting healthy relationships. So we have definitely incorporated these aspects into the Bonds of Kinship curriculum. And I will draw examples from the work during this presentation. But at this point, overall, it's, helpful to know that these factors blended in very naturally with our curriculum and are also very much in line with Islamic principles. So when we talk about thinking of the root causes of violence, we can relate that to the Sunnah and Hadith around the way we treat others, and the prophetic Hadith about the best of you is the one who is kind to his family, and so on. And then shifting culture, that again, we do try to make a distinction between cultural norms and faith teachings. And again, that was a running thread throughout the curriculum. Skill building, as I've mentioned, is a vital component. And the promotion of healthy relationships. So a lot of that did come through discussion within the classroom setting, and also within some of the offshoot programming that came from Bonds of Kinship. Again, more information on that is to follow. In terms of the resources that we used, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to use as broad a range as possible so that there was a variety of content, and also we wanted to utilize the wealth of knowledge that is out there. So this is just an example of some of the sources that we used. You can see, for example, we have resources that are based around modern parenting practice in the mainstream world. So for example, the whole brain child, nurturing parenting. And we did peruse all these resources to make sure that they were in line with Islamic principles. And, it was really beautiful to see how the two intertwine very well. And, there was definitely a harmony there. And then we also used very specific Islamic resources. So some of them from, for example, islam.org, which has a lot of information around family life within Islam, for example, to sources such as the Muslim Times, which provided very up-to-date information from an Islamic perspective. And we wanted to bring in all those factors to the curriculum. And alhamdulillah, as I mentioned, there was no shortage of resources that we could utilize. We did also use outside consultants for certain aspects of the curriculum. One in particular was relating to our session on child brain development. We did call in an expert to give a talk around that and to make suggestions on the best way to communicate, a fairly complex subject in a way that was digestible to a general audience. And finally, we also relied on our own agency material and resources. So for example, as I mentioned, we do have programming in the community, and we drew, from that work, also from the work we were doing with our youth group and Peaceful Families Task Force, obviously, and also from the survivor support groups that we run. It was quite useful to be able to draw on some of the experiences that we had, that we know of through that, to be able to incorporate our prevention work. So the timeline, as I mentioned, so we received the grant in 2016. October to December is when we carried out our community needs assessment. And then the following year in 2017, it took us up until about March, April time to complete the curriculum. And then in the summer of that year, we held a pilot class at Iman Center, which is a local center here in Washington State. And I should mention that Iman Center was one of the communities who was actually really active during the time of the formation of the Peaceful Families Task Force. So once again, it was really nice to kind of come back to them and to be able to really highlight this fairly novel piece of work that we had produced. In September that year, we held our first facilitator training, as I mentioned. Our goal was to be able to get community volunteers on board with this program. And so alhamdulillah, that was well attended. We had some key community leaders who turned up for that training. And alhamdulillah, you know, a couple of those have actually since then co-facilitated this program. And in November of that year, November 2017, we rolled out the first full session. So the 5 two-hour sessions, which were rolled out at the Muslim Association of Puget Sound, who has been a great partner to us in this work, but also generally within the work that we do at API Chaya. So shout out to them. The following year, we developed an offshoot program. So we spent the first 6 months developing a curriculum for elementary youth and teens, and that was rolled out that summer at the Islamic Center of Redmond. And then that September, we held a second round of facilitator training. In 2019, actually on the request of those facilitators who were trained up in September, we ran another round of the full series for them to really experience it and kind of deepen their knowledge. And for the rest of that year, we rolled out our elementary program at the MAPS Girl Scouts group. In October last year, again, we were at Iman Center for the full session for their Sunday school and PTA. And in November, we actually began having the curriculum translated into Arabic on the request of another community group that we were working with, where language access, you know, was a need there. And then this year, obviously some of our plans had to be modified in view of the current COVID issues. But in February, we did do a standalone presentation again at Iman Center. And this was at the request of the participants of the full series. And so that was on the concept of family within Islam and just digging a little deeper into that area which had been touched on in the main curriculum. In March, we did another one, and that was around supporting the emotional well-being of children. So again, it ties into the whole idea of domestic violence prevention. And inshallah, next week we will be starting, and this is exciting for us because we've never done this before, but the full series of Bonds of Kinship online at Medina Academy, which is a full-time Islamic school based here in Redmond, Washington. And we will be running that series twice in order to accommodate, you know, time availability and so on. So our complete curriculum, you can see this is the cover, and then we have here the 5 sessions outlined. And what I'm going to do now is share for you just to get an overview of what the content of the curriculum is. I won't go through every page, but just maybe highlight a few of the areas which you know, are unique in the curriculum. So this is how it begins. We have here the table of contents, which highlights the 5 sessions. So just around here, we have what is family, ages and stages, which relates to child development and discipline. Then we have a session on self-worth and self-compassion, intergenerational communication, and then we end the sessions with one entitled The Role of the Community. And the idea behind that is that we feel by that point, you know, we've provided information and skills around self-development and then how those skills can be related to the family. And, you know, thinking about the family as a building block to community and society, and also thinking about the support systems that people need, we felt it was important to bring in the aspect of community. So that comes through on a number of layers. So firstly, we think about what are the gaps in our community support systems and how can those be bridged. You know, what resources do communities need to be able to better support their members? And so it's a very kind of symbiotic type of session. And this is actually one of the favorite parts for me, because we hear a lot of feedback from participants about what they would like to see. And that really helps us in our future planning for programming. Okay. So we have then an introduction, some testimonials. This printable curriculum was shaped after we'd already began to roll out the program. So we already had some feedback from participants that we were able to include in here. We have instructions on how to use the curriculum, and then we go into the lesson plans themselves. So what you will notice is that it's a very standard format for each session. And the reason for that is that, firstly, it's very simple to use. So you can see with the what is family, we start off with the talking points, and these are for the benefit of the facilitator, I should say. We don't give out everything to the participants. So this is just the lesson plan. And again, you know, whilst there is a definite structure here, it's also very adaptable. So facilitators can remove anything that they feel is not necessarily relevant to their audience. And then we have the discussion points, the activities, all laid out in a fairly simple manner. And then we come on to the materials section here. So after the facilitator materials, we have these materials which are for the participants. So in practice, you know, in advance, you could photocopy all of these and have them ready to be handed out during the class. So we have an agenda for each session. The centering activity, which is typically either a Quran ayah or a hadith, which sets the tone of that particular session. And then we have an icebreaker. So for this one, it's a family bingo, which is really nice to get people comfortable around each other and to sort of feel comfortable speaking about, you know, items relating to their family and so on. And then we have, you know, general material, or rather materials that are specific to that session. So for example, in this first one, we have discussion prompts. And then this page here, the 5 love languages, which was the skill for that particular session. And so we have some...
Nilam, I don't think we see the curriculum.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
With the presentation, yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know. All right, let me just work on that. Okay. Okay, I'm going to try this another way, so bear with me. Okay. How's that?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. All right, so I'll just backtrack slightly then. So this is the curriculum itself. As I mentioned, we have those 5 session plans. Moving down, so I had just been talking about the first session, the bonds of, the what is family. So I'll just, here, as I mentioned, so all of the first pages are for the use of the facilitator, so they can look at this in advance. It lets them know what materials will be required, what the talking points are. It's really a, try to make it a very simple to use step-by-step guide. And as I mentioned, it's very adaptable. So, facilitators can pick out exactly what they feel would be most useful to their audience. And then here are the materials for the participants that I was referring to. So there's the agenda, the centering activity, the icebreaker, discussion prompts. They do vary depending on the session, but it's all contained within the curriculum. This can be photocopied and, given out to the participants. And also for each session, we do have an evaluation form, which has been really useful for us when we are looking at either adapting the material or the content for following sessions. So for example, when we used it for the first time at MAPS, after the first or second session, I believe, we received a comment that some of the information examples that we were giving were very much related to a particular age group of children, and they would love to have more information on how those skills could be applied in their interaction with teenagers. So that was wonderful, because by the following week we were able to gather more information and just to kind of shift the angle from which we were coming. So I'm a huge fan of these evaluations and really do encourage participants to try and complete those. Okay. And this copy we can actually share after the webinar. So, you will have time to be able to look through it at your leisure. I can send it back to the slideshow. So, Hasna, I don't know, would you like to take a pause at this point for questions, or would you prefer me to carry on?
Sure. We just had a question in the chat from Sunny, and she's asking how many sessions are there and how long is each session?
Great, yes. So there are 5 sessions in total, and ideally each session is 2 hours. However, as I mentioned, it is possible to adapt that. And I was going to come on to this, but I'm happy to just cover it at this point. So we had a request from one community asking whether we could keep each session 45 minutes. Now that, I admit, was a real challenge. We just about managed to scratch the surface, and I think we still went over by about 5–10 minutes. So, you have to be realistic as well. And as it happened, that particular group of participants actually requested that we extend subsequent sessions. So, alhamdulillah, it seemed as though they did find it beneficial. So there's that point. The other thing that can also be done is that you can actually combine sessions. So we've had an instance where we combined sessions 3 and 4 because of time constraints. And again, that worked pretty well. It would mean, for example, you wouldn't need 2 icebreakers, so you could eliminate one of those. You could eliminate the introductions. And so it's definitely feasible to do that. And in fact, the online program that I mentioned earlier, so the way we're going to be carrying that out is by doing 3 2-hour sessions in total. So it drops about 4 hours, but again, it's something that you can sort of switch around. So we're going to be doing, for example, session 1, what is family, with session 3, which is self-compassion. So we'll combine those and then give greater time to child development and discipline and intergenerational communication, because we know that those are the key areas where there's a lot of discussion and question around that. we were also approached to do a full day seminar as well. So yeah, but as I said, optimum, I would say 2 hours, but it's definitely flexible there.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else would have any questions before we proceed? Okay, and so as you mentioned, Nilam will be able to have a copy of the curriculum and to share with everybody who registered today.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you can continue.
Okay. So the format that each session takes is that we, and these are just the key elements. You will see that there are other details within the curriculum, but the basic format of it is that we begin with an Islamic perspective on the particular topic. And so, for example, from the first session, we analyze what the Islamic family model looks like. So that forms the basis. We then talk about the research and data on that topic. So again, for the, in session 1 around family, we provided some advanced reading around what modern science says about families and family structure and the importance. After that, we do offer time for discussion with the group. And a lot of that is is based on questions. So for example, we would ask them to think about, what are the parenting practices that they experienced growing up, and how do they feel that that impacts the building of positive family relationships. And these discussions are often small group discussions. Again, we've noticed that that provides a little more safety for people, particularly in that first session. And then whoever wishes to share, or somebody from that group, can give a general overview of what their discussions disclosed. And then we have the skill building, as I mentioned. I've spoken quite a bit about that. And then we have the homework and evaluation. So I should start off by saying that there's no assessment for this program, and the idea really is to offer skills and information. But in terms of homework, what we do is ask that people try to practice some of the skills that we've gone over in the session within their own family relationships. And so the idea behind that is for them to kind of dip their toe in the water and maybe explore a different strategy. And also then to feedback to us as to whether that was really useful for them or not, and what could be a better alternative. So that's the main purpose of giving out that homework. And I should say one of the premises of our programs is to let participants know that nothing is compulsory, and they can participate to the level to which they feel comfortable, because we know that, as I mentioned earlier, this can be a sensitive subject. It could be a trigger for people, and the last thing we want to do is make people uncomfortable when this is really supposed to be promoting positivity. So for that reason, we are quite understanding of that. And the evaluation, again, as I mentioned, it's a core component and really useful to us. The other point to make about the adaptability, so, in terms of community, this is a program that we rolled out not only within Muslim communities, but we also had interest from a church in Seattle. And so at the same time that we were rolling it out for the very first time in November 2017, we also rolled it out to Beacon United Methodist Church in Seattle. And for them, so what we did is that we met with the pastor in advance, and we went through the curriculum. Again, this was one actually that we had to contract. So we picked out the areas that were suitable or, required by the community. And then we just exchanged, some of the ayahs and the hadith with more scripture-based texts. So, it's really something that is, I would say, it can take time, but it's definitely doable. And I think if you have a good partner to collaborate with, this can be a really enriching experience. Time-wise too, as I mentioned, it is adaptable within reason, but definitely, you know, it's also something that can be, it doesn't have to be presented in a chronological order. So each of the sessions we've actually designed so that they can be standalone as well. Which means that if people are strapped for time, then they can let you know, what would be most relevant to their community. So for example, in a couple of weeks, I've been asked to do a presentation with the Somali Family Safety Task Force. So they're running a series of sessions on various topics, and they've asked if I could do session number 1 on family. And that's fine, and it makes sense. And if people then want to learn more and implement the full program, then that's definitely an option as well. Okay, so bonds of kinship in the community. These are just a few examples of some of the places that we've done this work. So this one was with MAPS. This one is the bonds of kinship with Medina Academy. This was the one with Beacon United Methodist Church. These pictures are from the Iman Centre, which I mentioned. We worked with their PTA, well, their parent body, I should say, last fall. And this is an example of the classroom. You can see here on the wall, I'm a huge fan of these big post-it notes, well, I should say poster boards. And they're great for when we have discussion. It's really good to note down some of the questions or the points that participants are making. And we put these up every week, just as a reminder of, what previous sessions covered. So by the end of it, we had them not just on the wall, but also across the windows. But it's a really good way as well for people to be able to move around a bit. So, participants can come up and jot down their ideas on the board. So just a little tip there. I have here too a video of one of the exercises that we carry out with them. It's called the string exercise, and it comes under session 4, which is intergenerational communication. And it's basically designed to give people an idea of, or an analysis of communication styles. So it's one where a teen in the family discloses that they don't want to go to college. And in the first round, the people surrounding him, like different family members, have a very negative tone and response. And what that does is that it kind of cuts those bonds of support. So each person has one end of a string, and those are dropped after that point. And then we do the whole thing again, where participants are given a script that's a lot more positive and understanding. And as they express themselves in that way, then those strings are handed back to them.
So Sam, is there anything I'm missing that you feel this way, that why you don't?
Do you want to share the video or just the audio?
I would like to share the video.
Okay, so I think you need to stop this share screening and share again.
Okay.
Try that.
Can you practice that conversation?
Okay.
Susan, is there anything I'm missing that you feel this way, that why you're taking this decision? This is a big one.
Well, it feels better, so I'll answer. But I don't see the value of education right now. I would like to go and start working instead of writing the sets. And I know you guys work hard for it. I think
I think this helps the fact that now you're opening up and telling me what the problem is. So because now I look at it, well, he's very considerate because he doesn't want to put burden on the family. He's worried about the cost of the education. So it totally changes the perspective, you know. And so I think I would first say that I appreciate the fact that you are being considered and you're looking at the finances of the whole family. And but also emphasize that, you know, as a family, we love each other, we help each other the best we can. So whatever we can do to help you to reach your goal, we will do that. Even if it means that we need to make sacrifices financially, if it is something that you'd like to do, if you do want to pursue higher education, then we will be there to support you no matter what.
Well, thank you. And that's the reason why I don't know exactly what the topics and subjects I would like to get into. But what I see right now does not fit in with what, you know, I see is just generic. So going into the real world gives me a different perspective. The open dialogue, I can have this ongoing conversation. We can help it.
Hey, favorite uncle.
So from the uncle's perspective, I think I'll give what my college experience was, because he's talking about the experience and why you may not want to miss out on that, because you'll never get another opportunity at your age to experience some of these things. But it's beyond education. It's more about, you know, first kind of living on your own, but still having kind of a support network behind you, and all the other things that you end up learning. Give examples of what I learned from college that were not necessarily based.
Okay, so that was an example of, you know, the practical application of bonds of kinship within the family. And you may have noticed that from that activity, quite a bit of discussion sprang up around family issues and, you know, the kind of value that a supportive family can bring. So this is really, you know, a really nice way of implementing the message that we're trying to in a very relatable way to participants. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, one of the features of the program is that we do ask for feedback towards the end, so a review of the program and suggestions that participants may have. And in fact, on that, in session 5, we have a much more detailed evaluation compared to the other ones, because we really would like to know how people would like to take this work into the future, because even though the classes have ended, that doesn't mean that that's the end of the conversation. So, you know, we really do try to get that info from them. So the current programs that we have as offshoots, firstly is the facilitator training, which I mentioned earlier. So we have approximately 12 volunteers from a number of different communities actually. And as I mentioned, we've had, I'd say about 3 to 4 of them who have co-facilitated, you know, subsequent programs. And though that may seem like a small number, you know, it's a great starting point. And a lot of the way in which this work is spread is through word of mouth. It is organic. So we don't expect this to be something that will just be implemented overnight. And actually this pace, I feel, is, you know, quite useful for us because it gives us time and space to make developments and to really be thoughtful about the programming. And then we have an elementary program. I actually ran an online one just in June this year. And that's a 3 to 4 session program, and that covers, again, a very similar type of material, but just more age appropriate. So we have a session on emotional regulation. So that's the first one, where we're encouraging the kids to think about their own emotions and how they respond to the strong emotions. And again, we provide them with skills around that. Then the following session is on positive communication. And really emphasize, you know, alongside obviously respectful communication, they still have the right to draw boundaries and to be able to express their needs and desires. And the third session is red flags in relationships. Now, we don't go in at a very deep or daunting level with this age group, which is from around grades 3 to 5, but we make them very relatable examples. So for instance, you know, your best friend just suddenly stops talking to you for no reason, or, you know, something along those lines that they can relate to and can explore, you know, what are some of the strategies that they could use to both protect themselves and to maintain their friendship, for instance. With the teen program, again, very similar, but we go more into depth. We cover more complex situations. So, for example, we have discussion around domestic violence, sexual assault. We talk about power and control in relationships. We also talk about how to provide support to somebody who may need it, because we acknowledge that within that age range, that 13 to 18, teens are exposed to a lot, whether it's in schools or through the media, and also they are probably going out more. And so we really want to equip them with, you know, the skills to be able to navigate themselves safely in the situations that they may find themselves in. So be that within the home or outside. And then we had requests for a few standalone presentations following the full classes. I mentioned a couple of examples earlier. A couple of more specific requests that we had were something more in depth about mental health amongst youth. So this came from one of the parents who was attending the class. And then also around that time, there was a lot in the media about public school sex education. So they asked for a presentation around that. And, you know, so these are topics that obviously are of concern to Muslim parents. And so this program really provides an avenue for them to be able to ask for what they need. Because after 5 2-hour sessions, you know, you build up a pretty good rapport and trust with the participants. And I would say during those sessions, I think out of the 5, I think in following 3 to 4 of them, individuals would come up with a specific issue or ask for, you know, a bit more information around a specific skill. So it's really heartening to see that this program seems to be making an impact. Plans for the future curricula, we have had requests for one on spouse selection, a premarital curriculum, and possibly even a couples program. So inshallah, you know, those are our aspirations, and some of those we're working on putting together at the moment. But honestly, this would really bring this program into a very comprehensive curriculum, and really coming in, you know, at all levels and conveying that same message, those same values. And, you know, if we think back to those Washington State guidelines, where one of them was about shifting culture, then this could really be a way towards that. Because if we are promoting this message to members of the community from the elementary age up until, you know, couples who are already within a marriage, then, you know, that message is going through wide. And, you know, inshallah, we may see some type of development and move towards, you know, a community where there are more prevention practices in place. Language access is also, it comes into play here. So as an agency, we have a huge priority for language access. And for instance, we provide interpreters in person and online. We try to make our written materials available in a number of languages. And so we definitely, appreciate the importance of that. And we actually deem language access to be a human right. So as such, as I mentioned, we have an Arabic curriculum, which is now currently under review. So inshallah, in the next couple of months, we hope that that's going to be available for use. We have had requests for translations into Urdu and Somali. So, the hope is that we can meet those needs too. I mentioned that the spread of information about this curriculum has been very organic. So on a local level, as I said, we are very fortunate to have a few key community partners who are always open to us bringing our work, and that is invaluable. So typically, we start at 1 or 2 local centres, and then word spreads from there. We also do, our regular outreach and just raise awareness within the local communities that this programme is available. And it has been picking up more. I mean, at the beginning, I think we did maybe like 1 a year, 1, maybe 2. And now the requests, alhamdulillah, are coming in more. So there's definitely, publicity around that. On a national level, well, this is an example, alhamdulillah, it's great to be working in collaboration with National PFP. We've also had the opportunity to take it to a couple of national conferences too. Also, we have done workshops at the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which is the state body that oversees the majority of DV programs here in Washington State. So we've presented there, and again, there was interest shown by a number of groups, and not all necessarily faith-based either. And internationally, we live in a world now where it's so easy to access global resources and make those connections. So there are a couple of centres, across the globe who've also expressed an interest. And, we are more than open to sharing our resources and, providing the support that's required as best we can. And finally, picking up on that last point, it brings me on to the point about in-person versus online presentation of the programme. So initially the intention had always been for this programme to be in person. It's a very standard format. It makes the programme very interactive, and it allows, really rich group participation through discussion and the activities. And also just in terms of networking within the classroom. I saw a couple of times that, during breaks or whatever, people who'd come into the classes as strangers were now sharing contact details, or, I overheard discussions that were going on between them. So that was, those are some of the advantages of in-person programming. However, under the current climate, obviously we've had to consider alternative means. And so what I'm finding is that although initially, there was a little bit of hesitation from myself, it's actually quite a feasible method to implement the programme. And yes, there are some minor adjustments that are needed. So for example, when I'm planning for the upcoming online workshops, I'm aware that, for example, I have to email out the materials in advance, or maybe, that string activity that you saw in the video might not be as physical, but, we can definitely account for that and make substitutions. So I don't think that's a huge issue. And some of the advantages of the online programming is that we are able to reach so many more people than we would be able to usually. So, it's just more accessible, which is wonderful. And also platforms such as Zoom, do allow for interpreters as well. So, I really feel that the online programming does check a lot of the boxes. And I mentioned some of the examples that we've used the online platform for. We did it, as I mentioned, with the elementary group, and I did have some reservations because with that age group, I wasn't sure how things would pan out. But again, alhamdulillah, they actually, I think, were even more skilled with the online platforms than I was as the instructor. And so I learned a lot from them too, mashallah. But the focus was there. I think just, you know, we included lots of interactive, you know, sort of components, and we used the breakout rooms, so they got to speak to each other, you know, in groups of 2 or 3. So it's definitely doable. Okay, and with that, I think we're going to allow some more time for any questions.
Yep, sure. Thank you so much, Neela. One of the questions we had is that is the training free?
Yes, it is. We don't charge for any aspect of the program because our desire is to hand out the information. So we don't charge for any of it. If people want to offer a donation to our agency, that's totally fine, but there's no required fee.
Okay, wonderful. And a different question that is not relevant to the curriculum, that someone was asking that, how do we inform ourselves on domestic violence laws?
That's great. So I think depending on where you're located, certainly reaching out to a domestic violence agency is a great starting point. I mentioned earlier the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So it's possible that, you know, your state has a agency like that, the body that oversees domestic violence work in the state, and they have a wealth of knowledge. I mean, even if you went to that particular website of that organization, it's Whiskadiv. I can put it into the chat box, but they have so much information. Another place I can think of is Futures Without Violence. So I would say, you know, go online, visit the sites of organizations within your state, and even go broader just to kind of get an idea about what, you know, other states may be doing in terms of their work too.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Neela. Anybody else would like to ask any questions? Okay, well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Neelam. As promised, we'll follow up with everybody who registered to send an email with the curriculum, and perhaps we can provide your contact information as well. Maybe, Neelam, if people have questions, they could reach out to you.
Absolutely, and I do actually have my address here on this last slide. I'm sorry for my ineptitude with the technology. Okay, there we go. So yes, thank you so much for inviting me, Hasna. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for the people who joined today. I appreciate your time on this. And yeah, my email is up there on the screen, neelam@apichaya.org. And I'm more than happy for people to reach out to me if they have questions about the curriculum or want to see, or even any part of our more general work too. And if they just want to have a chat about, you know, the possibility of training or implementing it within their communities, I'm always open to those conversations.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks again, Neelam, for this extensive and brilliant discussion today on the curriculum and the great work that you're doing. And thank you for everybody who joined us today. And may you have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.